In today's science experiment, we're going to talk about the most important upgrade you can do for your bike and how fast you can stop. So understand this is a 52 pound, 22 kilo bike with a super high power motor. So it's going to need some really powerful brakes. So I custom built this bike up and I bought these TRP slates because they were super cheap. And unfortunately, they're some of the worst brakes I've ever used. If you ever tried SRAM guides, they're equivalent to SRAM guides. And these brakes came off a GT downhill bike. So not to harp on TRP, they make high-end stuff and they make affordable stuff to get you out on the trail, so don't get too upset with me in the comments. But let's start with this science experiment. So you might be wondering why I'm not trying to upgrade the pads or the rotors. That's because I bled these brakes, installed a 223 rotor, and it has aftermarket pads, and the TRP brakes don't have enough stopping power. So I'm personally a Shimano guy, so I knew what I had to do was bite the bullet and buy the Shimano Saints. Fortunately, Jensen USA had them on sale. This is literally the most money I've ever spent on a set of brakes, but after throwing $150 of TRP money in the trash can, I knew this was the best move. So these brakes, the Shimano Saints, I think they're the most underrated brakes out there, including the Pink Bike review video of all the brakes. And the best thing about Shimano brakes, super easy to bleed. You can swap in any lever. The pads are relatively available, and the most important thing for me is they're very easy to bleed and work on. The SRAM Mavens are on their third or fourth variation of calipers, levers. There's about 1,000 videos on YouTube about them not being bled because they're hard to bleed. And how to bleed them, the Shimano Saints are like an old Toyota Tacoma, Toyota truck. Completely timeless, pretty boring, and they do an excellent job. Any normal human would just install their new brakes on their bike and call it good. So let's start off with the science experiment with the TRP brakes and see what's the real weak point inside of the TRP system. So this is a Shimano XT brake line, the silver one in my hand. And I had this in my toolbox. And when we compare the Shimano Saint to it, it's got the big gold banjo here, probably for heat dissipation. It was a real bummer when that Shimano discontinued Z, because Shimano Saint is like the top of the line everything, and it's once you get to a certain point you just have diminishing returns as far as money. I mean, these are like super high-end badass pads that make a bunch of noise, but honestly the Z's were probably the best bang for the buck. So this isn't a Shimano video, this is what's wrong or what we can do to save these TRP brakes. So in my hand is a TRP brake line. So one of the biggest pitfalls of buying used stuff, I bought the TRP brakes from my friend. I got home and found out that the line was basically pinched. So I just spent $50 on a TRP line at Jensen. And bringing my grand total on the TRP brakes to $200. And they're completely trash. So it can be more expensive to go cheap. So go expensive if you can up front, depending on how serious you are about your hobbies or whatever. So here I'm measuring the TRP line because my bike has a TRP line installed on it, and we're going to see if the Shimano caliper and the Shimano lever will fit into the TRP one, because routing the lines inside of the bike is an absolute nightmare. So there is a slight variation in internal width, but we're going to see if it works. So I put a lot of Loctite on this bike, and the rear wheel is basically stuck, and this is absolutely terrifying because this bike has like 30 miles on it. I wasn't very familiar with the TRP brake system. So these are the TRP Evos. They kind of have an upgraded caliper. All the reviews of the normal TRP slates, they're absolutely trash. The Evos didn't have the worst reviews, but I think they're the worst ever. So looking inside of here, they're pretty affordable. Calipers, they have like aluminum pistons inside of them. Expensive brakes like the Shimano Saints, or maybe the more expensive TRP ones. They're going to have ceramic pistons. I honestly didn't have the TRP brakes fade. They just didn't feel like they had enough squeeze onto the caliper for a 30-mile day downhill on a 50-pound bike. So removing the TRP lever, or the TRP caliper, out of the way. I'm moving real slow, trying not to make a mess of everything. Inspecting the caliper here. First order of business, we're gonna start from easiest to hardest. So I'm gonna leave the TRP brake line installed in the bike, bolt up this Shimano Saint caliper, and see if this bike has enough stopping power. So I did a couple measuring, and the TRP lines, they come with 2 different banjo bolts. So in order to bolt this Shimano Saint caliper into place, I tried a couple different things, and the Shimano banjo bolt into the TRP line into the Saint caliper is an absolute match. But first, I got to get this thing fully bled up. Now, since I'm mixing 2 different brake components, I'm just going to do the otter bleed method. So checking the rear, I was like, both of the brakes were fully bled. So the Shimano brakes come bled from the factory inside of the box, and the TRP ones are bled as well. So I'm like, I don't even know if you need to bleed them if they're already pre-bled, but I am gonna fully bleed it to ensure I give you the proper review of leaving the TRP brakes in place with the Shimano Saint calipers. So I don't understand why the internet makes such a big deal out of bleeding brakes. It actually intimidated me the first time I went to bleed mountain biking brakes, because everyone overcomplicates it. So if you do this trick, you'll never struggle again. You just go on Amazon, you buy this $20 bleed kit. I linked it in the description. Extremely useful for bleeding shocks or brakes. Fill 2 syringes up. Don't think too hard about it. Hook up the syringes, one to the caliper, one to the lever. Exchange the fluid back and forth a couple times until all the bubbles are gone. Even though there's no bubbles in this one, because both of these brakes were bled and the lever was firm, this was actually an experiment to see if it needed to be bled, and it actually didn't. There's always going to be a little bit of air in the lines. Don't worry about it. The last step here, I'm pushing down on the lever side with the caliper side closed off, and this will pressurize the system, and in less than 10 minutes and $20, your brakes are fully bled. Closely inspecting the caliper, there's no leaks. So just to review that, it's a TRP brake line with the TRP O-rings, with the Shimano banjo bolt and the Shimano Saint caliper. So I gave it a lot of different squeezes, cleaned it off extraordinarily well. And there is 0 leaks coming out of this caliper. Another amazing tip is brake cleaner. Automotive level brake cleaner is absolutely amazing on bike parts. So I wiped off the rotor nice and good, because the Shimano Saint has like $50 cooling fin brake pads that we're gonna harp on in a little bit. So I set the calipers up into place, and let's see how it goes with a TRP lever and a Shimano caliper. So last night I went and rode the TRP brake and fully bedded in. And one benefit they don't tell you about the Avanox motor, having the strongest, best e-bike in the world, we can bed the brakes in uphill going in turbo. So the front, there's like no power out of it because it's not bed in yet. So we're just gonna slowly bed this in turbo. So quick side note, I installed the Shimano Saint caliper assembly on the front brake. Now it's not a perfect science experiment. Obviously I didn't want to spend like 3 days doing this, but it will give me somewhat of a gauge on how fast the wheels lock up. So we got one TRP brake I left them real loose so we can see them. One TRP brake, one Saint brake. Just so you guys know, a couple years ago I made a video about Saint brakes and I was like, I don't like them. They're too punchy. So this isn't like, things change, you know, your preferences can change. We'll see if that brake is too punchy or not. And in the video a couple years ago I put a lever like this on there. It was a Shimano lever. So for this science experiment, I'm just gonna pound out a couple laps at the test track. I'm not gonna do an all day bike park experiment because I need to be close to the workshop in case something goes wrong. It is very dangerous to modify your brakes. Even though there's no leaks now, they could like leak 6 months later kind of deal. Kind of don't want to mess around with the brakes. This was kind of the where I got super frustrated with the TRP brakes. So this little straightaway. So it's definitely a lot more powerful, but coming into that corner, you got to kind of brake a little bit earlier with the large lever. And it is still kind of a 2-finger lever. It's pretty disappointing lever. There's nothing you can do. And this one is a little on-offy. I know it's the perfect solution, but I'm not gonna have the budget for that. All right, so that being said, when you put 2 fingers on the TRP lever, it has a lot more stopping power, but the amount of force it takes before that thing really starts engaging is the polar opposite of the Saint. Like 100 pounds, 10 pounds. Keep in mind I have 2 polar opposite braking systems. One on the left, the Shimano Saint, is extraordinarily sensitive, and the other one requires 2 fingers and about 300 pounds of force to stop the bike. But I've completely adapted to this in 15 minutes. So don't think you need to run out there and replace your brakes. Now I'm complaining about the TRP lever being hard to pull. I want you to keep in mind, I'm a car mechanic, a bike mechanic, I fix all kinds of stuff. I got huge hands, and pulling a lever is not something that I normally complain about. I know Dale Cook, the brake review guy, builds these like beautiful videos, but he's also a little bit dainty. So when he complains about a lever being hard to pull like the Maven, I kind of laugh. So when I say these TRP levers are hard to pull, they're freaking hard to pull. So what this science experiment tells me is upgunning the rear caliper on the TRP brake lever and brake hose did not add any additional stopping power. It is pretty cool, especially for you TRP owners, to know that you can use Shimano brake lines, which you can find a lot cheaper and a lot more available. So if you want to upgrade your TRP brakes, don't go for the caliper. You want to go for the Shimano lever because they're super cheap. And in the middle of making this video, I was on my YouTube channel doing something, and this guy, same exact problem, I'm gonna call it the wooden feel of TRP. He upgraded the levers. The XT and the SLX levers, which I'm going to cover a little bit later in the video, definitely aren't as bitey as the Shimano Saint levers, whatever difference internally they have. But this guy looks like he's pretty satisfied with just upgrading the levers. Because, you know, glancing at the TRP calipers, they look kind of beefy. And they use the same pads as Shimano. So this video is designed to be helpful. I know TRP is probably going to have their blood boiling as they watch this video, but I'm here to help my friends out who watch the videos. And I say that because many brands will watch my videos second by second because it's user generated content and it's not sponsored. But let's get back to this. So science experiment number 2, I'm going to install the Shimano Saint lever onto the TRP line. And I'm not going to bleed anything. I'm just going to slowly, very carefully remove the TRP lever. We don't want to disturb anything. And then here I'm filling up the Shimano Saint lever with a syringe all the way to the top. So keep in mind, if you had a dry lever, this wouldn't work. You'd have to bench bleed the lever. But what this is going to do is potentially show you an extremely fast way to swap in brake parts. So it's inspired by Magura. They actually have a quick connect brake line for mountain bikes. And there's going to be a little bit of air even with a quick connect, but their brake system seems to be pretty reliable. So we're just trying it the backyard style. So screwing in this TRP line, guess what? TRP line on both sides is compatible with Shimano, back and forth. Whenever you're tightening this up to the handlebar, there is a torque spec, but honestly, you kind of want to make sure this thing's really, really tight, because if you don't ultra tighten it, it can leak and actually blow the line off, and I've had it happen before. After getting the line into place, I threw the funnel on here, and I did the little lever bleed at the top, and a couple bubbles came out, but honestly, the lever was firm before I lever bled it, and it was firm after. So case in point proven, you don't always have to bleed your brakes to swap parts in. Now it's always a good idea to, but if you were in a pinch, this would fully work. Here. Oh, these brakes are fucking good. Oh my gosh. So we don't have any leaks coming out of here, but sometimes leaks can happen like after a couple miles. So I wouldn't mess around with the front one because that's all the stopping power. But a little experiment on the rear line. It's a royal pain in the ass to run a new line through an e-bike. Sometimes the motor has to come out. There's a straightaway around this corner. And I was on those TRP brakes and I was like, dude, these suck. So it's not super fast, but into this berm. So the on-off bitey feel of the Saints, it's the polar opposite of the TRPs. You have to like feather them. So I'd probably prefer going with XT levers, but these are massive upgrade. So these are my SLX brakes on the Amish bike, and they have a farther lever pull. And they also have the larger, thicker Magura rotors. These ones pull in quite a bit farther. Not that much farther, but these are probably the ones I would go with. So it's substantially cheaper to buy the whole set like I did. That's why I bought the entire set. But it was a fun video to make, and no trash on TRP. Shimano makes junk brakes too. Like I was on these non-group set Shimano brakes on an Orbea Wild, and they were just as bad as the TRPs. It's just a fun experiment. So if you click these links in the description, it helps me make more videos because they're really difficult and expensive.